is Cheryl Erickson, and I'm the Indigenous focused ECE instructor with Louis Riel Vocational College. Today in Guidance 1, we'll review Chapter 10 and thinking about guidance and discipline. But before we get started, just a reminder to read Chapter 10 as this video isn't a replacement for your chapter readings. So we have briefly discussed discipline and punishment in earlier chapters of the guidance textbook. And so just to reiterate some of the reasons why we choose to discipline children, and discipline, when I say that, it is more it's a better approach to help children learn appropriate ways to express their emotions, opposed to punishment, which is intended to harm or hurt a child or individual to change their behavior. So punishment isn't really a productive way to deal with behaviors. In a sense, an adult is trying to control a behavior by doing hurtful or saying hurtful things to a child, and that doesn't really change the behavior. What ends up happening is it's giving that child mixed messages. It's saying to the child that in order to effectively solve issues, I need to hurt or say hurtful things to somebody else. So emotional pain is often more intense and lasts longer than bodily harm. So those things that are taking place when a child is punished can be very extreme and lifelong. So you cannot make children act differently by making them feel bad about themselves, and the idea to make a person pay for misconduct isn't okay. So really looking at those positive ways, because we do want to teach children what it is that they're doing that is wrong, so they understand and then won't repeat that. So some of the results that can happen to that child that is being physically punished or verbally punished, and you can see things like anger and aggression taking place. It's going to damage that relationship with that parent. They may become even fearful of that parent, maybe walking on eggshells. It does hurt their self-esteem, and why that takes place is because they're made to feel bad about themselves and their actions. And it gives those mixed messages. They aren't really sure what it is that they're doing wrong in most situations, and they're just made to feel bad about themselves. They could fear that adult. Really important learning opportunities are getting missed. So those teachable moments when a child is in the moment doing something that they shouldn't be doing, there isn't an opportunity to explain why and ask them those questions that we've talked about in previous chapters to get down at their level and problem solve. It does affect their critical thinking skills. It doesn't promote lack of inner control, and sometimes they get to be deceitful and sneaky because they worry about, because of those missed messages from that adult, they'll do things in a sneaky manner so they don't get caught, so they aren't punished. So deceitfulness and sneakiness comes out of that, the fact that they're not really learning why it is or what it is that they've done wrong. So anger and aggression, when we look at anger and aggression a little bit more specifically, that anger and aggression, sometimes children who are punished feel that need to get even. They have all these emotions that need to be released. And sometimes those anger issues will resurface, and a lot of times that takes place when they're playing with their peers or in an environment like a child care center where they feel safe and secure, and those emotions just tend to get released during play situations because they know the adults' responses will be different than the home responses. So often they vent their anger to other children, and sometimes we realize that punishment is taking place at home because of things that the children might say when they're verbalizing some of those just verbal statements that they make that you think, yeah, that was probably maybe something they've heard, just that wording that they've heard it from an adult role model. So children who are punished learn from a powerful role model how to give punishment. And so then they believe that that is the way that you deal with situations when you're angry. Damage relationships. So how does that punishment damage a relationship? And so they're going to have some strong emotions, some negative feelings towards parents, other authoritative figures, so to speak, and even their peers. And so they have a understanding at a young age that this is how we deal with things when we are angry, upset. And so therefore they carry out those particular actions. And so they believe that it's okay to hit, to kick, to yell, and to say maybe belittling types of things. And so what that essentially does in a childcare center is it can turn off the children that they're playing with and affect their relationships with their peers. A child is not going to want to play with them if they get angry and they hurt that particular child. So in some situations they can be outcasted because of their hurtful behavior towards their friends. So it not only damages those adult relationships, but it can damage their relationships with their friends. How does physical punishment or punishment in general damage self-esteem? Children get their opinion of their worth from the adults in their life. And so if an adult is punishing them and telling them, making negative statements about the children in particular, that's going to stay with the child, and that's going to be how they view themselves. And so we want to, we want to build children up. We don't want to be disrespectful and hurtful towards them. We need them to have a good self-concept, because we know self-concept in the end, if you feel good about yourself, you'll more likely try new challenges, experience new things within in your life, and be successful in life. So we want children to feel valued. Fear is also something that can take place in a child who is punished, and so they get to fear adults. Adults, when you look at adults in a child's life, they are the people that are supposed to protect and keep you safe. And so then the world can become a scary place. So fear keeps children from positive activities as well as negative ones. So you sometimes end up with children that don't want to participate, don't want to be a part of group or try new things because they are fearful of the unknown, and maybe think negative things will come out of that situation. And that will also speak to learning. So if they're fearful, they're not comfortable, that fear is almost overpowering, so that they can't really focus and concentrate on what is happening around them. So it can be detrimental to their ability to learn, to absorb what's going on within that environment. I did speak about earlier in this slide presentation in chapter 10, how deceitfulness plays out for children in terms of punishment. And so they do end up becoming a little bit sneaky because of a fear of punishment. So they choose to do the things that they do because they think that maybe if mom or dad doesn't know, or I'm sneaky about it, I won't get caught, therefore I won't get punished. And so just some statistics regarding that sneakiness and that deceitful behavior does show in juvenile crime rates. So statistics show that juvenile crime rates are increasing, and and resulting in getting tough or punishing harder. So, that's really sad that it goes to that extreme as well. Research also shows that children who are punished are more likely to turn to crime than those who are not punished. And so that does speak to the sense that children are missing out on those teachable moments, those learning opportunities, and they are not really getting that good sense of what's right and what's wrong because they are committing crimes. So what's right and what's wrong is completely being missed. And also statistics have showed an increase in incarceration does not show a reduction in crime. So the cycle just tends to repeat there as well. So missed learning opportunities coming out of being punished. Punishment undermines children's learning opportunities about what is inappropriate and what is appropriate. So we really want to focus on that in our teaching of children, and really take advantage of the opportunities to positively guide and discipline children and teach them as we're in the moment going through those different types of scenarios, because we do want them to get a good understanding of right and wrong. Instead of youngsters thinking about the behaviors that have caused the problem, they end up thinking about, they think resentfully about that punishment. And so punishment, therefore, again, the child is losing that opportunity. They're not thinking about what it is they've done wrong. All they are is focusing on the punishment and the hurt that's coming out of that situation. So that is what resonates in their thought process, is the hurt and the feelings that they've had regarding being punished. It also focuses on attention on what not to do rather than what to do. And that's a big process with young children, is we always want to positively guide them. We want them to know as we're giving them instructions and we're going through our daily activities, what it is that we want them to do versus what not to do. That is positive guidance. Critical thinking is a huge component of development in young children, and we want to really work on opportunities to promote that critical thinking, because it does really guide them in success, or for success in future learning. So some other statistics regarding punishment and how it affects children in their critical thinking. Brain research shows that fear, anxiety, and humiliation have negative effects on that mental growth. So, what is it doing to those neurotransmitters, and how pathways are being formed within that brain can be a huge factor in why children aren't learning and growing in the way that they should. So children raised in an environment where they are being punished usually have lower motivation to think beyond parenting and memorizing activities. And so they know what they know. They learn that this is how scenarios are dealt with, and in verbally abusive or physically set ways, versus really thinking logically about the steps that should take place and what is more positive. So we really want to focus on positive. Children also tend to be submissive to ideas of others and accept what others are saying, as a matter of fact, versus those opportunities to critically think explore and discover. So those pathways aren't being created in an appropriate sense. We want children to really rationalize things and think about them before just accepting the value or the word of somebody else. So why is punishment typically used by adults? And I think that, it could be things stemming from their own childhood. Often people believe that the way they've been raised and I've turned out okay is the way to go in terms of raising their own children. Adults often suffer stress, and when they're suffering stress, tend to act more spontaneous without really thinking about what it is that they're doing. It's almost a reactive than being a proactive. So it's not sometimes the most appropriate way to deal with things. A lot of misconceptions take place in punishment as well. And then that also goes back to sometimes the way you've been raised as a child. We think that punishment is needed to change that course of direction that the child is going in, that it's going to be a corrective type of thing versus a detrimental type of thing. So it's really, finding out why or appropriate means to deal with children that are having some challenging behavior. Lack of discipline skills as well. So really not knowing what is appropriate to discipline a child. And so again, you get to the more reactive ways of dealing with behavior problems than really managing situations and utilizing those teachable moments. So misconceptions, some adults say that they do not believe in punishment, yet they rely on it because they don't really know what the difference is between punishment and discipline. And that's a huge challenge within itself. So really finding out what the differences are. Humiliating children in front of a group and calling it peer pressure is another misconception. Sarcasm, although sometimes adults don't believe that children understand sarcasm. Sarcasm's not only words as well. Children may not understand the gist of exactly what an adult is saying, depending on their age. However, body language and facial expressions tell a story as well, and so children do read into those emotions, and they get that feeling that what is being said is not a positive thing, and it is hurtful. Taking away privileges and calling it consequences, and we talked about consequences in Chapter 8, so really finding out what those differences are and how it should be in that a moment and it should be natural. Actions that inflict emotional pain are punishments. So again, really, looking at what the differences are and making choices. But going back to childcare and how we care for the children that come into our environment, again, I have to reiterate how important our positive guidance techniques are going to be in changing children's behaviors. And as we're going through those steps and guiding them, we really want to ensure that they're understanding why it is or what it is that is the problem and how we can help them fix it. Finally, the lack of discipline skills sometimes affect how parents are punishing their children. So some people are not informed about other discipline approaches. We know what we know. And it's really important to find out what your different approaches are and how to deal with behaviors. They don't know how to set clear limits and communicate expectations about desirable behavior. A lot of mixed messages could be given in those types of situations as well, so it limits the children's understanding. And parents sometimes confuse non-punitive discipline approaches with spoiling kids and letting them run wild. And so that does conclude Chapter 10, Punishment versus Discipline. If you do have any questions regarding Chapter 10, please do see your instructor, as well as checking in to ensure you haven't missed any handouts or assignments pertaining to Chapter 10.